How mitakiapi. Chita washte la kilo mielo. Blamie to kashla. Mini wakan waplatkeshni yellow. Greetings, relatives. My name is John, and I'm an alcoholic. And what I said in my language was to greet you in my language, tell you who I am. And I said, thank you, grandfather. I do not drink anymore. I am Arapaho praying in the Lakota way, and it is in this way that when we get up in front of people, we introduce ourselves and then we honor those who are present. And so today I'd like to honor you. I want to raise my hand up to those of you who are present, who the elders, Ken, and I don't remember what your name is, but thank you. Thank you for being here. 9 years sober there. Thank you. I raised my hand up and I honor you. And I raised my hand up and thank Ty for inviting me to come and speak today. I'm very honored to do that. And I want to also raise my hand up to those who are coming back. Keep coming back because I honor you, because I know your struggle. I'm honored to be here. I'm wearing an eagle feather. When you see a Native American wearing eagle feather, you know something important is going on. And we wear an eagle feather in an honoring ceremony. And this is a ceremony where I'm honoring you, and I thank you. I've been sober. My sobriety birthday is August the 14th of 2012. And on that morning of 2012, August 14th, it was a Tuesday. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a 3/4 empty fifth of vodka. I was already drunk. And the night before, I had gone to bed, and I swore that the next day was the day I was going to quit drinking. Now, I hadn't done that a whole lot. If I had $1 for every time I seriously tried to quit drinking, I'd have $5. But my circumstances, I had reached my turning point. The woman I was in a relationship with had left. And I'd like to say when she left that I got sober and everything was happy, but I drank for another 2 months and was burning up her phone and I had finally got to the point where I've got to do something. Before I got to the kitchen table that morning, I woke up. I was very, very serious about not drinking. I got to the refrigerator, opened it, and just out of habit, reached in, pulled out a glass that I had put in there from the night before that had a mixture of Sunny D and vodka in it, and I finished it. Well, I'd not even thought about, when I woke up, I'd not even thought about, today I'm not going to quit drinking. That was the night before. When I woke up, it was all habit to go to the refrigerator, see what's in there, pull it out. And then after I finished that glass, which was it wasn't that much, I thought, oh man, where was that conviction of the night before? And I thought, okay, I'm just not going to buy any more alcohol. I'm just not going to buy it. But I had to go to the bank that day and deposit a check from work. And I thought, I'm just going to walk to the bank and I'm going to come home and I'm not going to drink. But Wells Fargo in that neighborhood is right by Fiesta. And I walked out of the bank with some money in my pocket and I walked straight over to Fiesta, bought a fifth and went home. Began to drink it, and by the time that bottle, within an hour, that bottle was 3/4 of the way gone. I thought, I was already twisted. I got to that point where the room started going sideways, and I thought, oh good, here it is. And I went to the computer, I got online, and I was looking for AA in Las Cruces. There was 2 or 3 numbers on 2 or 3 different sites, but at that time, my vision was blurry. I couldn't really make sense of the colors and the blippies on the screen, and the numbers that I called were all disconnected. And I thought, oh, I've got to do something. I called my friend Pat Phelan, and I said, Pat, I'm a drunk. He says, I know. He's my hiking buddy. He's like 74 years old and had been hiking with me for the last couple of years. And he said, well, John, why don't you look in the white pages? I had not even considered that in this age of technology and computers, and I thought, oh, he says, it's probably the first entry. So I hung up, and I called that number One was disconnected. The other one was the answering service that we have that District 4 provides for the Las Cruces area. The lady that answered the phone said, this is Alcoholics Anonymous, how can I help you? And I said, I'm having a problem putting down the bottle, I need some help. She goes, do you want somebody to call you back? I said, yes, please. 30 seconds later, Marty C. called me. And that's how I opened the door. But I did it. No one made the call for me, but I knew where to go. Because years before, in the year 2000, I had been introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, at the time I quit drinking, I was drinking about a handle every couple of days, but at least a fifth a day. And my hair was falling out. My blood pressure was running about 212 over 112 all the time. Frequent nosebleeds almost every day. And dry heaving. If I'd wake up sober or if I had to keep from drink, I had the dry heaves every day. If you got enough alcohol in me, then that would knock out that vagus response that makes you throw up. But I had been dry heaving for the last 3 years, and if not every day, just frequently. Always dry heaving. My liver was swelled up in my belly, where it looked like I was gaining weight, but that was actually my liver. I'd been in the hospital a couple of years before. My kidneys were going on strike. And after I found out all that horrible stuff, I drank for another couple of years. But I was in bad shape that day. So not only had I reached my turning point emotionally, but I'd also reached it physically. I was gonna, if I continued to drink like I was drinking, I wasn't gonna probably make it through the end of the year. So these are the things that were involved in my turning point. I did not start drinking like that from the get-go. I managed to put together 13 years of sobriety, and then I turned 14. And in my 14th year, my friend and I were sitting we're at his grandfather's house, and we collected a 6-pack of beer, half bottle of Spinata, which is this Spanish kind of a port, I guess, and half a fifth of some sort of Irish whiskey. That was in my hometown. I'm from McPherson, Kansas. I was born in Wyoming. I was given up for adoption immediately by my mother, who didn't want me raised in the circumstances that she was in. She basically left me for dead, but she didn't even name me. So on my birth certificate it says Baby Boy Cook, which was her last name through marriage at the time, and father unknown. I grew up. I left Wyoming. My mother wanted to take the family to McPherson, Kansas, so I could get an education system. I guess she thought in Kansas was better than rural Wyoming. And I spent my grammar school, high school, and I was a juvenile delinquent. I have this thing in common with every alcoholic I have ever heard speak. Everyone I've ever heard stand up here at this podium will say, you know what, I felt like a freak of nature growing up. I was never accepted. I didn't belong. I was unconfident. And I'm no different in that respect. I was a very unconfident teen. I was a wayward child, in trouble with the law all the time. I was very smart, but I didn't do my homework in school, so I was failing in school, but it was just because I wasn't doing the homework. So all this stuff I've heard people repeat up here, and I'm no different in that way. I did grow up in my adopted family. My mother and my father were good to me. But my father did die when I was 13 years old. But I didn't suffer any familial abuse in the family or anything like that. When I took that first drink with my friend in this great big cement tube out on the edge of town, I'm a little different in that alcohol did not produce in me that I didn't fall in love with the warm feeling or the fuzzy feeling, but and I didn't make a conscious decision back then that this was what I was going to do all the time, as often as possible. But I did find, like many of us who felt ostracized or different, that alcohol, where we weren't accepted in some circles, some of the things that our bodies, the way our bodies are different, that we can tolerate alcohol like we do. We do get respect from our peers at the time, but for being the last man standing. And then the last man standing at the party gets to go home with the last woman standing. Things of that nature. But I didn't ever drink to belong, but I did find that I was able to communicate more comfortably with my peers. I don't want to focus on the past of my drinking career because I am no different from you all in that respect. It was an introduction to alcohol and a slow progression from an occasional drink and some fun to a fifth a day. I had a career in the military. I did well in school, and up until I was 36 is when I started drinking seriously. Now, I had gone to AA in the year 2000, and I would think I was about 34 or somewhere in there like that. And I had lost everything then, but when I got to AA at that point, I was more interested in getting back the things that I had lost: my house, my girlfriend, and my job. And I knew in order to do that, I had to stop drinking. But my focus, I went to AA in McPherson, Kansas, and my focus was getting that stuff back. My focus was not staying sober. And when I got that, I put together about 90 days, and when things started getting good and all that stuff came back, I went back out. I thought, wow, now I know that I can quit when I want to. If I need to, I can quit. And if this stuff gets bad again, I conducted that experiment that the big book calls it the great obsession of every alcoholic, to be able to drink like normal people whose bodies are not like ours. We want to drink like them. And I conducted that experiment of how can I drink and get drunk all the time, because that's what I like to do. I didn't drink for any other reason other than for the effect that it had on me. And that's another thing in the big book. It says we drink for the effect that it has on us. And I tried to figure out how I can keep a job and how I can maintain. See, I didn't, there's another place, and I don't know the big book, I can't tell you pages, but what I'm telling you I know is in there because I hear it all the time. They say some people who tried to quit drinking tried to do it by limiting their drinks or only drinking on weekends, not taking a trip, trying to alter their way of drinking. I didn't try to do that. I tried to alter the circumstances around my drinking. I tried to alter how I was conducting myself at work. It wasn't the amount or what kind of booze or how often. I was trying to manipulate people and places and things in my life so that I could continue to drink but still be successful and happy. That don't work. I've been through a lot of jobs because I'd show up to work smelling like booze, even though I hadn't been drinking that morning, but it was left over and then they'd take me down to the ER and they'd say, oh, your blood alcohol content, you quit drinking what time last night, John? Your blood alcohol is still over the legal limit, point whatever. I said, oh. Yeah, well, it was sure nice working here. Sure too bad we couldn't work things out, go on to the next job. So at 36 years old, I was heavy set because I was a beer drinker at that time, and I took great pride in the fact that I did not drink hard alcohol. I'm a beer drinker, beer snob. But I was gaining weight, and someone said, hey, you know what? If you drink, hard alcohol liquor doesn't have as many calories. You can get real screwed up and not gain that weight. So I did that, and I lost weight, but that was when the serious drinking started, and it wasn't long. I was drinking a handle of whiskey a week, and it wasn't too long, maybe a year and a half before I was at a fifth a day. And then by the time I was at a fifth a day, I had graduated, like many of us our choice of drink is vodka at the end because people tell us, well, they can't smell that on your breath is good. And so while that is true, it isn't true for us who maintain a blood alcohol level high enough to smell it in your sweat. So they're not smelling it on your breath, but they're smelling it on your body. And so yeah. And so, let's see, 36 to about 10 years of serious drinking. I didn't shake when I didn't have a drink because I'm a medical person. I was a corpsman in the Navy, and I knew from working in rehabilitation hospitals that the reason people shake and have the symptoms that they do is because they're dehydrated and they're low in vitamin B, especially thiamine. So I took vitamin supplements and I kept myself real hydrated all the time. But on the day that I was sitting at the table and calling Alcoholics Anonymous, even that had my alcoholism had even overcome my efforts to not shake and feel weird without a drink. That morning, I discovered as I got sober that I was shaking, and I had a 4-day period of hell that I did not think I would experience because I'd never experienced it before. So Marty called me back, and he says, I hear you're having a hard time quitting drinking. I said, yes. He says, do you need a meeting? I said, yes, but I'm drunk. He said, that don't matter. I said, I don't need a meeting right now, but I would like to go to a meeting today. He says, I get off work at 5:30. I'll come to your house and pick you up, and I'll take you to a meeting. He says, you got any booze in the house? I said, I'm pour this rest of this vodka down the sink, and I'm sure there's booze stashed somewhere, but I'm not gonna look for it. He says, try to stay sober. Don't take a drink, and maybe you'll start sobering up by the time I get there. And that was around noon. Marty came, and he took me here. He took me to the Arid Club. There was a 7:30 beginners group that was not well attended. I think there were 2 other guys on paper, and they were wondering if there was going to meeting. The chair of the meeting wasn't there, and they said, "Are we going to have a meeting?" Marty says, "Yeah, I got a wet one, and we're going to have a meeting right now." And I sat with those 4 guys, and that was my first AA meeting. And then Marty said, "Okay, Wednesday night there's a real good meeting, young people in recovery, and I'll take you to your first real meeting where it's a lot of people and stuff." But he says, tonight I don't want you to drink, and if you need help that way, I can help you. I said, you know what, I'm good tonight. And I was, because at that point I was so desperate that I was going to do no matter what it takes, at least for that night anyway, that I was not going to drink. I knew that when I got home, if I got in that bed and did not leave the bed, that I would stay sober. And that's what happened. I got in bed. At the time, I had a job at the NMSU. I went to work the next day. He says, call me when you get home from work. He came and he picked me up and he took me to Young People's. When I got to Young People's, I met a guy named Quint. He handed me a big book. He says, pick us a topic. And I'm shaking. At that point, I'd been almost a whole 24 hours of that alcohol, and I'm shaking and I'm freaking out. I don't know how I made it through the workday. I found that when I was busy and walking around, though, that if I had something to occupy my mind, I was okay, But everybody, hi, I'm so and so, couldn't remember names. I couldn't focus. I couldn't think clearly. And then here's somebody handed me a bit, and I knew a little bit about AA because of my exposure and stuff. I knew what picking a topic was. I couldn't even remember the Serenity Prayer. They opened the meeting, and I opened the book, and it was the start of the chapter of the woman, the housewife who drank. And I just read that, fear of fear. It was a woman's story. It was the fear of something like that. Anyway, the topic that night was fear. I read a couple of paragraphs from the first part of that story, and we talked about fear that night. And when it got my turn to share, I raised my hand up, and I said, I'm John. I'm an alcoholic, and help me. If I don't get somebody to talk to after this meeting, I don't know what's going to happen. There were 5 guys at that meeting who have been involved in my sobriety from the get-go. There was Trevor M., Mike J., both of who, Sean K., Quint, Marty, who took me to the meeting. All of those guys are still sober today, and 2 of them became my sponsors. Sean King later, when Mike Jones left town, and Mike became my first sponsor. The Trevor M., Jake, young Jake, and those guys are still sober today. And a guy named Josh, who he's not in the program because his problem was he's more of an NA person. But those 3 kids got with me after that meeting. These are all kids who were at the time not even 20 yet, 18, 19, said Jake was 17. They said, we're going to the Wingstop after this meeting. You're welcome to come with us. We sat at that Wingstop and we talked about drinking and drugging and women. And we stayed there till noon, and Trevor took me home. And he said, okay, we're going to get you to midnight all the time, John Hawk. I said, good. He says, I said, why midnight? He says, because after midnight you can't buy booze. And he left, and I repeated that cycle again. I got up in the morning, and at those nights that I laid in that bed, I was shaking, and I had my head on one pillow, and I had the other pillow, and I was pounding it. I was like, damn, when is this going to leave? How long does this take to get better? And I felt so crappy. But I knew if I stayed in that bed and didn't get out of it, except to go to the bathroom and just to go to work, that I was going to be all right. And I repeated that. Said Marty came over again the next day, took me to a Thursday night meeting. And those guys got me to midnight again the second night. And I got a long list of phone numbers. At the Wednesday meeting, and they said, call us. And the next day I did. I called Marty, and I didn't call anyone else because he'd come over and got me. But on the third day, there wasn't anybody to take me to a meeting. I can't remember what the circumstances were, but I'm at home. I'd gotten home from work, and I'm still shaking, and at that point I'm sweating and just feeling, well, you guys know. I called the first, at that first meeting, Mike Jones collected his 90-day chip, and Trevor collected his 60. And at that point, I'm in awe of anyone who's collecting a chip. 60 days, are you kidding me? So I put a star and a check mark by those names. And I thought, if I'm going to use this list, I'm going to call those guys because they know how to stay sober a certain period of time. I wanted to call the guy that said, hey, come to the Wingstop with us. And at that point, I couldn't remember names and things, and I ended up calling Mike J. And I started talking to him like he was Trevor. He says, well, I'm not Trevor, but I was at that meeting. I'm the guy that collected 90 days. And I said, oh, okay. He said, how you doing? And I said, I'm doing shitty. But I'm not going to drink, and I'm doing what they told me to do. I'm calling people on this list, and when I hang up with you, I'm going to call somebody else. He says, well, I'll tell you what, John, I know somebody. Do you remember Quint? I was like, no. He said, well, I'm going to call Quint and see if we can't get someone over to your house tonight. He called Quint. It took 2 hours for me trying to describe where I live and how to get there and stuff because I'm real foggy. I couldn't believe how inept I was, but they finally got to my house. Quint L. walked in with Mike Jones, and he said, hi, John, I'm Quint, and I want to introduce you to your sponsor. I went, whoa, because the first time in AA in McPherson, Kansas, they always talked about sponsorship, but that was a meeting where it was all war stories. Everybody told war stories. You didn't hear a whole lot about success or how good things were in life. We heard a lot about how they drank. It was a war story meeting. And then I was always wondering, how do you get a sponsor? Is it you just ask somebody? Well, who do I have? I didn't get those questions answered. And here comes somebody walking in my house. Hi, I'm Quint. I want you to introduce you to Mike, and this is your sponsor. Oh, I said, this is great. And then he proceeded we go into the big book, and he said, I look on page 76, and Mike said, yeah, page 76. And he said, go to the bottom of that page, and what does it say there? And he says, we would go to any lengths. That's the page where it says at the bottom of the page, we will go to any lengths to quit drinking. And then he says, John Hawk, are you willing to go to any lengths to quit drinking? I said, yes! Yes, I am, and I'm so happy that you guys are here. And he says, well, if you're willing to go to any lengths to quit drinking, are you willing to do anything that this man tells you to do? I said, yes, I'm so willing. I don't care what I have to do. And what I didn't know about sponsorship at the time was that it's recommended, I know this today, it's recommended to get someone with some time, someone with at least a year, who has been sponsored by someone who's been sponsored by someone who has been sponsored. And it's a good thing I didn't know it then, because I'm I have a real attitude problem, and if things don't go correctly or the way I think I would say, like, if he would have walked in and said, this is your sponsor, I'd say, oh, he can't be my sponsor, he's only got 90 days. But there were forces at work that night. Mike Jones talked to a guy named Jack Clower. I'm saying last names and I'm recording this, I'm going to have to edit that out. But Jack and Quint were Mike's sponsors, and they told Mike the week before, they said, Mike, if you don't sponsor somebody, you're going to die. And so Quint having Mike sponsor me was not only good for me, but it was what they thought that Mike needed at the time. And so that's how my first sponsor was someone with so little time. He hadn't even gotten through the steps. He was on step 5 or step 4 when he began sponsoring me. But Quint said, John, here's the deal. Mike has worked the first 3 steps, so he can take you through those. And if you guys have any questions, you guys can call your sponsors and your grand sponsors. So call me or call Jack. So I actually had like 3 sponsors. And that night, Quinn asked me things like, do you believe God? What you like to do? I said, I like to play guitar, I like to write poetry, I like to make crafts and things like that. He said, start doing that stuff. Start doing that stuff that you like to do. That's going to keep you sober. And they stayed with me till midnight. And we set up a time where I was going to meet Mike once a week. And that night I went to bed. The previous 3 nights I'd gone into bed and I had curled up and I was pounding the pillow. But that night I had the spiritual experience that Bill had in his book or in his story, where I had the white light experience where I laid in that bed and I felt really good, because one of the things that kept me drunk was lonely and the other was bored. And I was neither of those that night. I had been in the company of sober alcoholics for the last 3 days, almost constantly. And so I thought, if this is the way it's going to be through my early recovery, this is going to be great. I'm not bored, I'm not lonely, and a feeling of such intense peace came over me, and that was the feeling that everything was going to be all right. And they told me, my sponsor, those guys told me, I said, Debbie this, Debbie that, Debbie. They said, you're not getting sober for Debbie. She may come back when you get sober, she may not. You've got to be okay if she doesn't come back. And you need to leave her ass alone. Quit calling her. You're getting sober for yourself. You're building a new life for yourself. And then we talked about a lot of things about what was required to get sober, but the things that stick in my mind were they went over what's different this time. What's going to be different? What happened last time that you went out? Well, the last time this time it's got to be different, because they said, John Hawk, the last time you went out, you got your shit back and then you went back out. He said, your focus has got to be sobriety. What that means is you've got to leave Debbie alone. You can't focus on a relationship and focus on sobriety. You can't focus on your job. And if that job is keeping you drunk, that job's got to go. Everything got to go. Your focus has got to be on sobriety. That's what's got to be different this time, John Hawk. So I'm thinking of all these things as I'm laying in that bed, and it's all making sense. I've got a sponsor. I'm not bored. I'm not lonely. Everything is going to be all right. And then the thought came, you know what? If I get sober, I'm even going to be okay without Debbie. And that's when that peace hit me. I wasn't bored. I wasn't lonely. I had a sponsor. I hadn't drank in 3 days. Even that weird twitchy feeling and the nausea left like that more. I was like, whoa, I don't feel sick tonight. I didn't have to get up and dry heave into the toilet bowl. All this good stuff was happening. I couldn't believe it. So I had that I'll never forget it, that moment of peace, such intense peace. And I decided that night that I was going to do what it takes. Mike took me through the first 3 steps. He had me make a gratitude list. I don't know how anybody else's sponsors did, but the sponsors and my sponsors said, okay, my assignment that night was to make a gratitude list and a wish list. That was what I was supposed to have ready for Mike when I met him the next week. This is my step book. And I have my gratitude list and my wish list. My gratitude list was my health as it is. My gratitude was that I'm alive. My gratitude at that time was for Debbie and all she had done for me, for my friends, for the roof over my head, for my roommate or the guy I was renting the house from, that I had a job. I was grateful for that. For the friends who I have in AA, and this is only 4 days in AA, who saved me, from drinking. For my sponsor, for my talents, guitar, poetry, art, blah, blah, blah. And then my wish list was to get a better job or move up from where I'm at. I wanted to get my driver's license back. I came in this program, I didn't have nothing I didn't have to take the elevator all the way down, but I didn't have a car and I didn't have a license and I had a lot of tickets. I wanted to repair my relationship with Debbie. I wanted to win back the trust of the people I'd lost trust with. I wanted to repair broken bridges. I wanted to quit smoking. I had a vision of buying a travel trailer and living in a fifth wheel and moving around. And I wanted to get a car, and I want to pay off my student loans, and my last entry here is to win the lottery. And we'll talk about this wish list when I get to the end of the step work that I did. But that's my gratitude list and my wish list. So they told me to make 90 meetings in 90 days. But friends, I'll tell you, in my first year of sobriety, I made 2 and 3 meetings a day, especially in my first 6 months. At 30 days sober, I'd been put on suspension I'm not going to get into this story, but I was suspended from work and then fired. And I found out I lost my job at 30 days sober. The day I collected my sobriety chip at Sober at Sunrise, I went to work, had the interview from the investigation. He said, "You're fired." Sorry, Ken. And then I walked out to the car. Mike Jones said, "Get in the car. We're going to Taos." And he said, "Get in the car and shut up. We're going to Taos." I got no money. He said, "Just get in the car. What'd I tell you about shutting up?" And we went with Daniel Sneed, Andy, Trevor, Jake, Josh, about 6 or 7 of us, and Angela. And they took me to my first AA conference, the Mountain Men Rendezvous in Taos. It was awesome. My step work was relatively easy, but the way I approached it was, I already believe in God. I already know I have a problem. I already know God can take this from me, and I'm ready to give it all to God right now. So there's 1, 2, 3, boom, let's go. Mike says, "Doesn't work that way." And that's when I balk. Everybody has their certain thing that they do in their recovery that's a little bit different, and some people, may hold it against them or not. I balk at meetings because in my first couple of months of sobriety, when they really laid the program out, they said you have to work it this certain way. I said, why, and I resisted a little bit, and that's why I balk and cluck at the meetings, because that reminds me of where I was, and that allows me to I feel like I'm getting away with something. But Alan C., he'll say the F word and make it a point to say the F word, even at a meeting in a church. That's what he does. Ron N., we have anonymity. We don't say our last names. He'll say, "Hi, my name's Ron Nessel, and I'm an alcoholic." That's his thing, just for example, So everybody has their thing. Balking at meetings is mine. So now I don't know why I got off on that thing, but anyway, went to my step work. Yeah, I was balking. he said, I want you to get a 12 by 12. I said, all I need is the big book. I don't need a 12 by 12. Well, he just, no, I'm telling you, get a 12 by 12 because the steps are in it. And we're going to follow the 12 by 12, and we're going to follow the big book. And I was getting these reading assignments. He said, read the doctor's opinion, and we'll talk about it. I said, well, if we're going to talk about it, why do I have to read it word for word? Why do I have to read it? He says, because that's what we do. That's how my sponsor told me to do it. That's how his sponsor told him to do it. And that's how I'm telling you to do it. So, oh man, so that's, yeah, and that was it with every assignment. Read the assignment, and then we're going to read it again together. And if we don't understand any words in it, you're going to get a dictionary. We're going to look them words up. And if you keep balking, I'm going to have you write the whole thing. So just be happy that you're good at this point that you have to read it. Okay. So he'd come over, and then I would, we would be talking about it, or he'd start reading it. We'd read the chapters. And then I'd get up and I'd start pacing and I'd start walking around. And I'd go and I'd light a cigarette and I'd stand at the open the screen door and blow the smoke outside. He says, I need your full attention. I said, I'm listening. Besides that, I've already read this. He said, all right, I'll just stop. So he stopped. He would stop right every time I got up and tried to do something else, get a drink. He said, sit down, you know. And I did that for a few meetings before I figured out, okay, I'll just sit here and we'll just read this. But anyway, that's just how we did it. We did it through instead of just going 1, 2, 3, boom, 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 it was read, write this. What do you think of this? List all the reasons why you had problems with alcohol. What were you doing that was, you do incredible, weird shit to stay drunk, Write that shit down. You've got a problem with alcohol. And then people would say, you didn't have a problem with alcohol, you had a problem with life. And alcohol was the solution. I don't care. I'm going to tell you today that my problem was alcohol. I had a life problem too, but alcohol didn't make it any better. So we went through the first 3 steps like that, and we got on my knees, and I dedicated my will and my life to God. And at that point, at that meeting with my sponsor, Quint was there. Also, because he wanted 3 of us together to hold hands and for me to dedicate turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand him. And Quint, at that point, he said, John, do you go to church? And I said, I'm a Catholic, but I haven't been to Mass in a while. He says, are you a recovering Catholic? I said, I don't know. He says, because if you don't like the Catholic Church, I got a church. I want you to come to church with me. I said, okay, well, let me think about it, and because Quint said it's important not only for you to, in your recovery, if you believe in God and the Jehovah God is the God that you believe in, that you participate in a community that believes kind of the same thing, and that you do that, not only every week but every day of your life. And that kind of made sense to me at the time. It took me a couple of weeks. I didn't screw around with the steps. They said, we're not going to screw around with the 4th step. They showed me how to do it, and at that point, I was falling into line. It took me 2 weeks to do my 4th step, and that's full 4th step, writing everything, resentments. And then we did my 5th step, and Mike Jones came over, and I had written every filthy thing that I could remember at the time down, and we talked about it. And a lot of the stuff that I'd done and he'd done, and Mike and I had a lot in common as men with our character defects and things that had gotten us to where we were. So I took that long list, and then Mike left the house that day, and I thought, you know what? This is just like confession. If you're Catholic or if you've been in the church, we work a 5th step every time we go to confession. We tell God, ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs, the other human being the priest. And I thought, if I'm going to do this with Mike, I might as well just go to the church. Holy Cross was in my neighborhood, and I might as well take this list and take it to whatever priest is hearing confessions that day. And that's what I did. And I told the priest what was up. I said, here's my list of sins. I had to make it. I'm getting sober. He says, give it to me. And he told me that day, and as I sat in the confessional, he says, John, what do you have in your life that God didn't give you? I said, I don't know. I said, I don't know, because I'm thinking that God gave me everything. Everything I have. And it's all temporary. I don't really own anything. It's all, you just have it for a little while, and then it goes away, and you get something else. I said, everything I have in my life is from God. He says, no, that's not right. He said, John, you've got something in your life that God did not give you. I said, what's that? He said, your sins. God did not give those of your creation. And that goes back to later on as I'm reading the big book when they talk self-will and right and doing things their own way and things like that. He said, God didn't give you that. That's your own willpower. That's your own thing. And that's what we're doing in confession today. You give to God the only thing that God did not give you, the only thing that you have that God didn't give you is your sin, and God wants it. And I discovered more details about that in steps 6 and 7. He says, give that to God. He'll take care of it for you. God wants it. He's going to take it. And I thought, whoa. And when I shared that in a meeting a couple days later, everyone was like, whoa, where'd you figure that at? I said, in confession. So anyway, that was steps 4 and 5. 6 and 7. And then from that day forward, the next day, that was a Saturday afternoon. The next day, I thought, well, shoot, since I've received the sacrament of penance, I might as well go receive the sacrament of the Eucharist, because that's what you do after you receive penance. And I went the next day, I went to church. And then I thought, wow, I went to confession, and I received the Eucharist, and I went to church. I'm going to do this every week, just like Quint said. So I became a member of a Holy Cross faith. And the next week, I went to church. I figured some things that I could do to get involved with the community, and I got to looking at the church roster of things that you can do. There's different ministries that they have. I thought I'd become a member of the Knights of Columbus. And that's the suit that I'm wearing today. This is my jacket that I wear to Knights of Columbus meetings. I'm a third-degree knight today, the Knights of Columbus. So I became a member of that organization, and from step 3, I got involved. I did what my sponsor said. You know what, John? Get in the church. Start doing what they tell you on a daily basis, not just a weekly basis, because spirituality is a daily thing. Religion is a place where you go with like-minded people once a week. That's religion. Spirituality is the thing that's lived every day. And then by the time I got to step 6 and 7, I was trying to take inventory and give specifically these things back to God like I did in confession. There's just step 5 in more detail. You think about it and become willing to let that stuff go. I sat, Mike had a relative or a person that was doing some therapy with him that sat in a sweat lodge. And he said, John, you ever sat in a sweat lodge? I said, who do you think you're talking to? I sat in a sweat lodge all the time and all about a sweat lodge. I'd never sat in a sweat lodge. I'm Native American, had been trying to get into ceremony with Native Americans over my life because I wasn't raised in the culture. But anyway, in September, I think it was near the end of September of that year, I sat in my first sweat lodge. And I shook the facilitator's hand, the medicine guy who pours the lodges for us in our community. I shook his hand. I said, I want to do this all the time, as often as possible. Since the government did such a great job of trying to kill off every last Indian in the country and kill our religion, it's not like you can find a church or a lodge to go to anywhere you go like you can if you're Catholic or Muslim or whatever you are. So I couldn't sit in the lodge every month or every week. But Indian spirituality is the same philosophy. It's a spirit. It's a daily thing. It's just using different tools, honoring the Creator in that way. So, but I began sitting in the lodge. I've sat in the lodge once a month, every month since then. Become involved with Sundance. I did Humble H's Vision Quests every year since then. So I honor the Creator through my Catholic way of seeing the Creator, and I honor the Creator in the Lakota way of praying. So 6 and 7, we're giving it back, and then 8 and 9. Making a list of people you'd harmed, and then making amends to those people. I made those lists. A lot of the folks on that list were either couldn't find them, like I have a wife and a kid by that wife. The thing around the divorce in 1991 was, I'm not going to make you pay anything, but you'll stay the fuck out of our lives for the rest of your life. And at that time, that was fine by me. But that was something that's an amends. I still have to make that amends. But to call everybody that at that point, I couldn't make an amends to Debbie because she was still off limits to me, and she still wasn't seeing me, but she knew what I was doing. So I did that. That was 8 and 9. Then the rest of them, 10, 11, 12, those are all maintenance steps. continuing that daily inventory. When you're wrong, promptly admit it. Step 11 was easy for me because I was involved in 2 modes of spirituality at that time. And every time I sat in the lodge, every time I went to church, every time I did something the Knights of Columbus, that was all activities to improve my conscious contact with God as I understand it. And then step 12, carry the message. And in December of that year, I started a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous at my church because they'd appointed me the addiction guy, contact person. So I started a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and then I started going to district meetings. They said, "Well, you're going to start this meeting?" I said, "How do you start a meeting?" They said, "Go to the district meeting, and you'll meet some people who'll tell you how to do it." And I've been going to district meetings ever since, and I've sat in a couple of chairs at district. So step 12, by the time I was at step 12, I was involved in district, I was involved in church, and I was still going to meetings 3 times a day, at least 1 meeting a day. And that was the steps. Since then, all the things on my wish list have come true. Debbie, I got back together with Debbie that January after 4 months. They said you have to stay away from any kind of relationship for 90 days. We got back, we moved back in together in January, and things were really good. Later that year, I can't remember if it was in my first year. I think it was in my second year of sobriety. But from the get-go, I started looking up, as part of my 9-step work, looking up the tickets that were outstanding, and I paid all of them a little bit at a time. And then there was one set of tickets that I had to show up in court for that were driving on revoked license and no insurance, and in Kansas they take that stuff real seriously, and I was facing jail time with that last charge. They said you have to get a lawyer, and a lawyer cost $1,500, and the bus ticket was only $100. So after I had gotten enough money saved to at least buy a bus ticket, I bought a one-way ticket to Leavenworth, Kansas to stand up in court, and my relatives all wrote me letters to take with me in that folder with all the charges. Said, when you get in that courtroom, you open up that folder. I got in that courtroom. I knew I was facing 1.5 years in jail, $15,000 in fines. And I opened up that folder, and the first note in there was from Ike, and the members of the lodge community said, "John, when you stand up in court, you were not standing alone." And the next note said, "You got this," and other words of encouragement. And I walked out of that court 15 minutes later, a free man, because I stood up in that, and the judge said, "Well, you got anything to say on your behalf?" And I said, "Yes, sir." I stood up and I said, I'm a recovering alcoholic in Alcoholics Anonymous, and the reason I can stand up in court today is that I'm sober. And anybody in this court that wants to get sober, come and see me. And I sat down. And the judge looked at the prosecuting table, and they said, what do you think in this case? They said, "Well, the charges are real old. We think that we recommend the minimum on everything. 5 days in jail and about $1,000 in fines, bare minimum." And he says, "John, the 5 days in jail is going to suspend that sentence." And what that means in legal speak is, well, you're convicted, but you don't have to serve it unless you screw up. If you screw up, then they double it. So I walked out of there a free man, and I went to I've done a lot of traveling since I've been sober, and every city that I go to, I look up online or find out what meetings are where in that city, and I call ahead. I said, "I'm John, and I'm an alcoholic, and I live in Las Cruces, New Mexico. I'm going to be in your neighborhood in 3 weeks. I'm going to come find you. I'm going to come to your meeting. Where's it at?" And at the time, I didn't have a car to drive. I said, "Who do I call for a ride?" And everybody that's always been on the other end of that phone said, "John Hawk, we're looking forward to seeing you, and you call so-and-so when you get into town, and they'll take care of you." And that was the way it was in Leavenworth. And they came to the house where the AA meeting was walking distance from that place. And so I walked over there, and then the guys there bought me lunch. And they said, "Here's $20. And I called my friend Patricia in Austin, Texas, and I said, "I didn't have to go to jail." She says, "Good. You know what? I'm going to buy you a ticket from there to Austin. Once you want to fly you down to Austin, I want you to be the speaker at Austin International Poetry Festival." So they said, "We're going to get a group of people together, and we're going to pay your fare down here as long as you get up and do some poetry." And she said, "Not only that, you'll stay here, you'll work for me and take care of my house and my husband, and I'll get you the money, and you'll get back to Las Cruces." So I didn't have to spend any money getting back. And I actually made some money towards my fine. I found through ceremony, I found my adopted parents. I had a vision in the lodge, and a month after, I started looking, or I didn't even start looking. My sister called me. She said, I found my parents. My sister's adopted too. I said, how'd you do that? She showed me how. And 3 months after that, I found out that everybody in my family is dead. My mother, I don't know who the father is, aunts, uncles, everybody's dead, but I did have a surviving great uncle and a great aunt, and then through them I found out I have a half sister. And then just this month I got in contact with a cousin that I have and his mother, but anyway, got in contact with them. So on my wish list, I have been unemployed pretty much since then, doing odd jobs ever since, but since I don't buy booze, my cost of living is so low, I don't have to worry about nothing pretty much. So and today I'm in college. I've been in college for 3 semesters. I'm a Crimson Scholar because I've paid off my started paying off my student loans. So I repaired the relationship with Debbie. I got my driver's license back. Someone, when I got back and I had my license back, they said, John, how are you getting around? I said, I don't have a car. He said, you want to drive my car? Whoa, who does that? I mean, things just... And then 2 months after I borrowed this car, she says, you want to buy that car? I said, I ain't got no money. I can't buy it. She says, don't worry about it. You know what? I'm going to sign the title over to you. When you have money, give it. Let's see. So driver's license is back with Debbie. I actually broke up with Debbie, but that's a longer story, but we're no longer a couple. But so travel trailer I still haven't got. Win the lottery. I've won the lottery. I didn't win it in the way you think, but today it's because I don't make so little money not having a job. I qualify for Pell Grant. They give me $3,000 a semester to go to school. It only costs me about $800 a semester to live. And not only that, when I broke up with Debbie, I was like, how am I going to live? I volunteered at the Community of Hope for 2 years. They have what's called a HUD-VASH program. They got veterans, housing for veterans. Who haven't had a lease or is struggling and stuff. And they said, you're an alcoholic? I just say, you're an alcoholic and you have no lease. I'm living rent-free today. I'm living in a place that I volunteered at, and they've given me an apartment to stay in, and all they said is you have to go to school and be a good boy. Keep doing what you're doing. So I thought, if I'm going to live for free, I'm going to go back to school. And then I started paying off my student loans. It wasn't everything that I thought was going to be so hard to do has come true over a period of time. Slowly but surely got my license back. They said I only needed to pay $5 a month to pull my student loans out of default. I thought it was going to be $500, or you know what, because I owe $20,000. And then they said you only have to pay for 5 months, and then your loans will come out of default. You'll be able to get your grant money. So today, since I don't spend very much to live, my van's I only owe $500 more on that van. All this stuff that was on my list, except for the travel trailer, has come true. And I'll get that travel trailer because I'm in school to be a respiratory therapist, and they get jobs all the time right away, and they make a shitload of money. And it only costs me about $15,000 a year to live. And this $25,000, I thought, I want the money. I put a number out there to the universe. I want $25,000 by November of last year. I sat and figured, because I know I got to give a talk, and I know I've won a lot. I come up with a dollar amount. I've gotten over $30,000 over the last couple of years by November calculated. The money compounded monthly that I'm saving in rent, the grant money that I've got money coming in from going to school, and I've been invited to speak several times on Native American issues. They've given me a stipend to do that every time I've done it. I've gone to UNM and spoken to students there about being a Native, returning to the culture, and about ceremony. But it equals about $26,800 that I've gotten in the free money, So I have won the lottery, and I'm sober through it all. So today, I got a couple more minutes left. Today, what I'm struggling with, I've been spared. In the first 3 years of sobriety, my sobriety birthday was this last August, so I'm into my 4th year. But up until that time, I've been spared a lot of the trauma and things that people go through. I mean, everything has been taken care of. The Creator's looked out for me. But since August, this semester has been really tough in school, and I broke up with Debbie, but they told me the same thing after I broke up with her. They said give it 90 days. without a relationship until you can get comfortable with yourself. It was 90 days, and then I had ceremonies last summer where I met a woman, and we spent a couple weeks in the mountains together. There wasn't any hanky-panky much. There was no sex, but just having a companionship, and we developed got really close, and that woke up an animal in here. So, wow, this is nice. I'd like to have this all the time. So I got an emotional thing, but I'm not so focused these days on finding the right woman. Or it used to be I'm looking for Mrs. Right, but back in my drunk days was like Mrs. Right now. But today, after talking to Sean and some elders, I'm not even looking for Mrs. Right. I'm trying to be Mr. Right. I'm trying to be the right man. They say you be the right man, the right woman will find you. So, but I struggle emotionally with issues of jealousy because I am dating some people online, and I see some women. Most of my friends are not actually in the program that I socialize with, but just, life on life's terms. I've been spared it for 3 years, but this year I'm having a lot of stress over school, relationships, and things. But you know what? I'm sober through it all, and I've been shown how through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, the care of a loving God as I understand Him. So, anyway, that's my story. Things are great today because I'm sober. This is possible for everybody. It's not easy, but it's easier than being drunk all the time. So that's it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for having me up here, Ty. Oh, talk. Yeah, yes.